So The Little Prince, right? It's this book that everyone seems to know, maybe even loves. But like it's also kind of weird. And the critics, when it first came out, totally didn't get it.
Yeah. It's this French book, the most translated one ever, I think, but those early reviews, they were all over the place. And even now, people are still trying to figure out what it all means.
Right. Like, is it a kid's book? Is it, like, super deep philosophy?
It's both, kinda, which is what makes it so fascinating.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into today. This story about a pilot. He crashes in the Sahara Desert, totally stranded, and he meets this little prince.
From a tiny asteroid with a single rose.
Yeah, Rose. It's a whole thing. And the prince, he's been traveling around to all these different planets.
Right. And it's those encounters, those journeys that really give the book its power, especially, I think, for us as adults reading it.
Okay. So where do we even begin with a book like this?
Well, the dedication is interesting. It's to this guy, Leon Wirth, and Saint-Exupéry, the author. He first apologizes for dedicating it to a grown-up. But then he says, actually, it's dedicated to the child that grown-up used to be. Because, as he puts it, all grown-ups were once children, but only a few of them remember it.
Whoa. That's kind of heavy right off the bat. Setting the stage, huh?
Totally. It's like he's warning us, reminding us not to get too stuck in our grown-up ways of seeing things.
And then, in chapter 1, the narrator jumps right into his childhood. He wanted to be an artist, a painter, but he tells this story about this drawing he made.
Oh, the boa constrictor eating the elephant?
Yeah, that one. He thought it was brilliant, obviously. But all the adults, they thought it was a hat.
Classic. They couldn't see past the literal image to the, the deeper meaning, the imagination behind it.
Right. And that's a big deal, right? This idea that adults lose that ability to see the world in a more, magical way.
Absolutely. And it's that very misunderstanding that makes the narrator give up on art and become a pilot. Like he's retreating into this world of, practical things.
So even though he's a pilot, he still feels that disconnect from, I guess, the real world, the world of the imagination.
Right. It's like he's constantly running into these serious adults who can only talk about bridge, golf, politics, all the surface stuff.
Guys. They love talking about ties.
Exactly. So you can imagine how disorienting it is for him when he crashes in the desert in this totally life or death situation. And the first thing this little prince asks him is, please, draw me a sheep.
It's so random. Of all the things, a sheep.
But it's not random, right? It's this need for something more than just the immediate reality of the crash. It's a spark of imagination.
Yeah, I guess. But the little prince is pretty picky about his sheep, too.
Right. He rejects all those first drawings. It's ill, it's a ram, it's too old. He knows what he wants.
Yeah, and eventually the pilot just gives him this drawing of a box. Fine, the sheep's in the box. Happy now.
And the little prince loves it. He's totally delighted. Which, again, speaks to this idea of the power of imagination. He can see the sheep, even if it's not literally drawn.
It's like that whole thinking outside the box thing, but in reverse.
Exactly. And it's through this shared acceptance of the unseen sheep that their connection forms.
So we're getting hints about the little prince, but it's still all a bit mysterious. Where does he actually come from?
Well, chapter 3 starts to unravel that mystery, little by little. The prince asks all these questions, makes these offhand remarks about his planet. It's almost like he's thinking out loud.
Like that bit about the pilot falling from the sky, too?
Yeah.
He just assumes that's how everyone travels.
Right. And he's so curious about that sheep in the box, asking all these questions about its freedom, whether it needs to be tied up.
It's like these seemingly simple questions are actually pointing to some pretty deep stuff. What does it even mean to be free?
Yeah, and what does it mean to have responsibility for something? For someone.
Right. Okay, so chapter 4 finally reveals the little prince's home, asteroid B612.
Which, is a real designation for an asteroid. But in the book, it's this tiny planet, barely bigger than a house.
Wait, wasn't there something about a Turkish astronomer who discovered it?
Oh, yeah. This astronomer, he saw B612 back in 1909, but nobody believed him because of his clothes. He was wearing traditional Turkish attire, and the grown-up scientists just dismissed him.
Wow, seriously. That's so messed up.
Right. But then he dressed up in a Western suit, presented his findings again, and suddenly everyone believed him.
It's like the clothes were more important than the actual discovery.
Exactly. And that's a huge part of the book's critique of the adult world. It's all about appearances, superficial stuff, instead of the substance.
So the narrator gives us this number for the asteroid, B612, and then he says, grown-ups love figures.
Right. He's totally calling us out. Grown-ups want to quantify everything, put a number on it instead of actually understanding what it means.
And the narrator, he even says he prefers a more fairy tale-like way of telling the story.
Because fairy tales allow for the imagination to work, to fill in the gaps, which is something the adult world often struggles with.
And then we get to this whole thing with the baobabs. What is it with these baobabs? They're just trees, right?
Well, on the Little Prince's tiny planet, they become a huge problem. Like, they start as these tiny seedlings, but if you don't pull them up right away, they grow so big they can destroy the whole planet.
Whoa. Okay, so not just trees. More like metaphors for something.
Exactly. They represent these small problems, negative thoughts, bad habits, whatever, that seem insignificant at first.
But they can take over your whole world if you let them.
Right. And the Little Prince, he calls his daily routine of pulling them up his planet toilet. It's this constant vigilance, this discipline to keep the baobabs from taking over.
Okay, that makes sense. So, like, we all have our own plant toilets, things we need to keep in check.
I think so. The book is definitely suggesting that. And then the narrator, he draws this picture of the baobab-infested planet.
Yeah, that's a pretty intense image.
It's a warning, right? Not just about the literal baobabs, but about any unchecked problem, whether it's personal, societal, political, anything.
So we've got the dedication, the drawing of the elephant, the sheep, the baobabs, all these kind of symbolic elements that add up to
a critique of how adults see the world, or maybe how we stop seeing the world.
Okay, that's starting to make more sense.
Mm.
Then in chapter 6, we get this beautiful little detail about the little prince watching sunsets.
Oh, yeah. He loves sunsets. And on his tiny planet, he can just move his chair a little bit and watch the sunset over and over.
Oh, that's kind of sweet.
But there's also this sadness to it. He mentions watching the sunset 44 times in one day because he was feeling sad.
He doesn't say why he's sad, though.
No, he doesn't. But it suggests this deep emotional life, even at such a young age. He's experiencing his sadness directly, finding solace in beauty.
Okay, and then chapter 7, the sheep and the thorns.
Ah, yes. That's a big one. The little prince is worried about his rose, the one back on his planet, and he asks if sheep eat flowers with thorns.
And the narrator, totally practical, says thorns are useless, pure wickedness.
Right, but the little prince gets so upset by this, he defends his flower passionately, saying it's vulnerable, that it's unique and important to him.
It's not about the thorns themselves, right? It's about what they represent to him.
Exactly. It's the love and responsibility he feels for this particular flower. And when the narrator doesn't get that, the little prince starts to cry.
He's totally overwhelmed by his emotions.
And that's the point where the narrator starts to see things differently. He has to confront his own limited adult perspective and try to understand the little prince's world.
So chapter 8 dives into the backstory of the little prince and his rose. It's a complicated relationship.
Yeah, the rose is beautiful, but also really vain and demanding. She complains constantly about tigers, giraffes, needing a screen, a globe. She's a lot.
And the little prince, he's totally wrapped up in taking care of her, even when she's being difficult.
Right. But he eventually realizes that he was too young to know how to love her properly, that he took her words too seriously and didn't really understand her actions.
Which is kind of what leads him to leave his planet in chapter 9.
Yeah. He gets this idea to travel to see other worlds, but before he leaves, he carefully cleans his planet, puts everything in order. He's still very responsible.
He even waters his rose one last time. And the rose, she finally drops the act and tells him she loves him.
But she still tries to act tough, you know? She says she doesn't need the globe or the screen, that her thorns will protect her.
But you can tell she's actually pretty scared.
Right. It's a bittersweet farewell. She's finally showing her vulnerability, but it's too late. He's already decided to leave.
Okay, so the little prince is off on his journey. And this is where we get into the meat of the book, right? The encounters on all those different planets.
Exactly. Chapters 10 through 15 are all about these encounters with these strange adults who represent different aspects of the grown-up world.
So, Asteroid 325, the king.
The king wants absolute authority, but his power is actually limited. He can only command what's possible. Like, he can't order the sun to set early, even though he tries.
It's this critique of power for power's sake, right? Meaningless authority.
Exactly. And the little prince sees right through it. He finds the whole thing pretty strange and moves on.
Okay, next up. Asteroid 326, the conceited man.
Oh, this guy. He just wants to be admired, constantly fishing for compliments, applause, salutes.
But he's the only one on his planet.
Right. Which makes the whole thing completely absurd. It's like a commentary on narcissism, the need for external validation.
And the little prince, He's just bewildered by it all. He can't understand why anyone would need so much attention.
Because it's not about genuine connection. It's about feeding the ego.
Right. Okay, asteroid 327, the drinker. This one always makes me sad.
Yeah, it's a tough one. The drinker is trapped in this cycle of drinking to forget that he's ashamed of drinking. He can't escape it.
He just sits there silently drinking.
It's a portrait of addiction, of the self-destructive nature of trying to numb the pain.
And the little prince, he sees this and just says, big people are definitely very bizarre.
Because it doesn't make sense to him. He can't understand this kind of self-inflicted suffering.
Okay, moving on to asteroid 328, the businessman.
This one's all about greed. He's constantly counting and claiming ownership of the stars, like he wants to possess them, even though it's utterly pointless.
What does he even think he's going to do with them?
It's not about what he can do with them. It's about the accumulation of wealth for its own sake, the pure drive to possess.
The little prince contrasts this with his own understanding of ownership, right? Like he's responsible for his rose, his volcanoes. He takes care of them.
Exactly. It's a completely different mindset. For the businessman, it's all about abstract wealth, detached from any real value.
Okay, then there's the lamplighter on asteroid 329. He's an interesting one.
The lamplighter is obsessed with his duty, even though it's become meaningless. His planet spins faster and faster, so he's constantly lighting and extinguishing his lamp.
It's like he's stuck in this endless loop of pointless work.
Right. And the little prince, he admires the lamplighter's dedication, but feels sad for him. He sees the wasted potential, the missed opportunities for joy.
It's like a commentary on the nature of work, how it can become so disconnected from any real purpose.
Exactly. And then finally, before reaching Earth, the little prince visits the geographer on asteroid 330.
The geographer, he's the one who tells him to go to Earth.
Yeah. But the geographer himself never actually explores. He just sits there, collecting information from others, writing it all down in his books.
He's all about knowledge, but it's all secondhand knowledge.
Right. And he even defines the little prince's rose as ephemeral, which means it won't last forever.
Which really makes the little prince think about his rose and how much she means to him.
Exactly. It's like the geographer, with all his knowledge, can't grasp the true value of the rose, the emotional significance.
Okay, so finally, the little prince arrives on Earth, chapter 16 through 26. This is where things get really interesting.
Because Earth is so different from the other planets. It's huge, full of people, and it's where the little prince starts to understand what it means to be human.
Right. But first he lands in the desert, and he's all alone.
And that's where he meets the serpent, this mysterious, enigmatic figure who speaks in riddles.
The serpent is a tricky one. What does it all mean?
Well, the serpent claims to have power over life and death. He offers to help the little prince return to his star, acknowledging that he's not from Earth.
It's like a foreshadowing of what's to come.
Yeah, and the serpent's pronouncements are full of double meanings, suggesting both liberation and a kind of finality.
Okay, so then the little prince meets this three-petaled flower. Not as impressive as his rose, but she has some interesting things to say.
Yeah, she talks about how men are rootless, blown about by the wind, they lack a real connection to anything.
Which ties back to that idea of adults being disconnected from the world, right?
Absolutely. And then there's the scene on the mountain where the little prince shouts his greetings and all he hears are echoes.
It's like a metaphor for how empty and meaningless communication can be without real connection.
Right. He finds Earth to be dry, pointed, salty. He's disappointed by what he sees.
He misses his rose.
Yeah, and he realizes that the people on Earth just repeat what they're told. They lack imagination.
Which is the opposite of his rose, who always spoke first, who had her own thoughts and feelings.
Exactly. And then he comes across a road, and he knows that it will lead him to men.
It's like the start of a whole new chapter in his journey. But we'll have to save that for next time. So, pulling back a bit, what do you think is the core philosophical message of The Little Prince?
Well, for me, it's all about the importance of seeing with the heart, of recognizing the invisible things that truly matter in life. Love, friendship, beauty, meaning. These are things you can't quantify or measure.
It's that whole idea that the most important things are invisible, right?
Exactly. And it's a direct challenge to the adult world's obsession with what's tangible, what's practical, what's serious.
Right. Like the little prince's love for his rose, that's what gives his life meaning. And it's the time he spends caring for her that makes her so important.
It's the time you waste for your rose that makes your rose so important, as the fox says.
Right, the fox. He's a whole other important character, but we'll have to get into that next time too. So what do you think is the lasting impact of The Little Prince?
I think it reminds us to hold on to that childlike sense of wonder, to prioritize our relationships, and to be open to the beauty and mystery of the world,
Even in the face of all the serious stuff that life throws at us.
especially in the face of that stuff. Because it's easy to get bogged down in the practicalities, the day-to-day grind. But The Little Prince reminds us to look up, to see the stars, to remember what truly matters.
And to maybe even ask ourselves, what are the serious things in our own lives that could benefit from a little more imagination, a little more heart?
What are our roses? And are we giving them the time and attention they deserve?
I think those are some pretty good questions to ponder.
They are, and I think The Little Prince is a book that keeps giving. Every time you read it, you discover something new.
So, if you haven't read in a while, maybe now's the time to pick it up again, with fresh eyes and an open heart.
I think you'll be surprised by what you find.
Thanks for listening.